Everywhere we look, vaping has become a noticeable part of our daily landscape. From high school bathrooms to college campuses and even in professional workplaces, the sight of people discreetly exhaling clouds of flavored vapor has almost become normal. This trend isn't limited to one age group or demographic. While smoking in general was a vice associated with young adults and upwards, vaping has penetrated deep into the culture and trends of teenagers across the world who also view it as a less harmful option compared to cigarettes. This is a very unprecedented health challenge because this issue runs much deeper than a passing trend. Today, vaping has morphed into an addiction that spans generations, with millions potentially impacted for life. It is much worse than the rise of cigarette smoking in the mid-20th century, a time when people were unaware of the risks and companies aggressively marketed products as harmless. It took decades to fully grasp the dangers of smoking, and we have not even seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to serious multi-organ damage done by vaping, as studies take time to catch up. So let's shed some light on this issue today and see the true scale of what we are up against. Let's find out how we are getting trapped in vapor. Let's rewind a bit. The concept of an e-cigarette first came about in the early 2000s. Initially, these devices were created to help smokers quit by simulating the sensation of smoking without the combustion tar and the thousands of harmful chemicals found in cigarettes. Yet the technology quickly evolved and e-cigarettes gave way to vape pens and pods designed for continuous use and high nicotine delivery. Many people have been led to believe that these devices are a safer choice compared to smoking. But research is starting to reveal that while vaping eliminates tar, it introduces its own set of chemicals causing irreversible damage to the lung tissue. In fact, when we look at the vaping effects on lungs and cardiovascular system, the risk could be just as severe or possibly even worse. If we look at some numbers, according to the CDC, over 2 million middle and high school students in the US alone reported vaping in 2021. Meanwhile, studies reveal that e-cigarette users have nearly twice the risk of developing chronic lung disease compared to non-users. According to this study, e-cigarette users showed a 28% increased risk of developing respiratory symptoms and 8% increased risk of COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, compared to non-smokers or non-users. This trend is no accident. Major tobacco companies, the same corporations that spent years downplaying the dangers of cigarettes, have now invested heavily in the vaping industry. From Juul to Vuse, many of the most popular e-cigarette brands are owned or funded by big tobacco. The model is clear. E-cigarettes and vaping devices are just as profitable, if not more so, than cigarettes ever were. Okay, let's carry on. We will try to understand what a typical vape is and what it does inside our body at an organ level. A typical vape or an e-cigarette is a battery-powered device designed to heat and vaporize a liquid solution, often called e-liquid or vape juice, which users inhale as an aerosol or vapor. These devices come in various forms, like pen-like models to larger box-like devices. Components of a vaping device consist of a battery, an atomizer, which is the heating component that vaporizes the liquid, an e-liquid cartridge filled with all the not-so-good stuff that we will go through in a bit, the mouthpiece, and a sensor or a power button. The working is pretty simple. You press the button, a circuit is completed, the heating coil vaporizes the liquid, and it is inhaled through the mouthpiece. What that innocent-looking vapor contains is what is interesting. First up, we have good old nicotine. The amount of nicotine can vary, but many formulations have much higher nicotine concentrations than traditional cigarettes. Next, we have polypropylene glycol. which is a synthetic component used in the food and pharma industry, along with vegetable glycerin used to make those nice large vape clouds. Then we have various flavoring agents, including diacetyl, which is a butter-flavored compound that has been shown to cause lung disease who regularly inhale it, as per the American Lung Association shown right here. This used to be in popcorn flavors previously and was removed from most places, but now it is extensively used in many vaping products. Besides this, we take in several other chemical byproducts like formaldehyde, which is what we use to preserve cadavers in medical school. Acrolein, which is an irritant that can damage lung tissue and is produced when the coil overheats or when users vape at high temperatures. The coil itself, which is often made from metals like nickel, lead, chromium, or tin, can release trace heavy metals into the vapor. And nitrosamines in smaller amounts, which are chemical compounds that are known to be highly carcinogenic or cancer-causing agents. They are much more in traditional cigarettes, but are present in smaller quantities in e-cigarettes as well. So what does all this do inside a person's body? When someone vapes, the aerosolized particles from the e-liquid enter the lungs and interact with lung tissue at a microscopic level, causing a series of biological responses. All the chemicals mentioned earlier make direct contact with the respiratory epithelium, the delicate lining of the airways. This exposure triggers an immediate inflammatory response as the cells in the lining release signaling molecules called cytokines. These cytokines recruit immune cells, such as macrophages and neutrophils, to the site, which are intended to protect against actual invaders like bacteria and viruses, but also cause collateral damage to healthy cells when recruited by unnatural agents like vape. The high temperature of the vapor and the chemicals within it can irritate and damage the epithelial cells lining the lungs, leading to cellular stress and oxidative damage. This damage causes cells to release free radicals, which are unstable molecules that can harm surrounding tissue and DNA, contributing to mutations and potentially even cancer over time. Heavy metals and other toxic compounds such as formaldehyde and acrolein can be absorbed into the lung tissue and bloodstream, causing systemic inflammation and damaging the endothelial cells that line blood vessels. Repeated exposure to these agents will weaken lung tissue structure, leading to chronic issues like bronchitis, decreased lung function, and in severe cases, the development of fibrosis or scarring in the lungs. If permanently scarred, the lung won't be able to repair itself, leaving it more susceptible to infections, reducing elasticity, and chronic conditions that may persist long after vaping has stopped. This is also known as vaping-associated lung injury, or EVALI. Besides the lungs, vaping also has an effect on the heart. Even though vaping eliminates many of the harmful chemicals in cigarette smoke, nicotine itself can cause significant cardiovascular issues, being a stimulant causing an immediate spike in heart rate and blood pressure after each inhalation. Over time, this constant stimulation strains the heart, increasing the risk of hypertension or high blood pressure, and leading to conditions such as heart attacks. Nicotine causes vasoconstriction or narrowing of the blood vessels, which restricts blood flow. This restriction can make the heart work harder to pump blood, raising the risk of heart disease and increasing the possibility of events such as heart attacks or strokes, especially with prolonged use. Vaping also has significant effects on oral health. The mouth is the first point of contact for vaporized e-liquids, which means it absorbs many of the harmful compounds before they even reach the lungs. E-liquids often contain sweeteners and acidic flavorings, which can alter the pH of the mouth and create an environment conducive to bacterial growth. This can lead to an increase in plaque and eventually gum disease. Studies like these have shown that e-cigarette use is associated with higher rates of gingivitis, which is gum inflammation, and periodontitis, advanced gum disease, both of which can lead to tooth loss. The ingredients in e-liquid, especially propylene glycol, are dehydrating. Reduced saliva flow leads to dry mouth, which not only contributes to discomfort but also increases the risk of cavities and infections, as saliva plays an important role in washing away bacteria and neutralizing acids in the mouth. Vaping also affects our brains. Nicotine binds to the receptors in the brain that release dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward. Each hit of nicotine reinforces the vaping habit as the brain begins to associate vaping with a sense of satisfaction. Over time, this repeated dopamine release strengthens the urge to vape, leading to dependency. Chronic exposure to nicotine, especially in young people, can disrupt brain development. Adolescents and young adults are still in critical stages of brain development, particularly in areas associated with attention, memory, and learning. Regular nicotine use during these years can impair cognitive function and may even alter neural connections related to impulse control, increasing their susceptibility to other addictive behaviors. Nicotine withdrawal can lead to irritability, anxiety, and depression, creating a cycle where individuals vape to relieve these symptoms, only to make them worse in the long run. Vaping as a coping mechanism for stress or anxiety may worsen these conditions over time rather than providing any long-term relief. Vaping also affects our immune system. Research shows that chemicals in e-cigarettes, particularly flavorings, can inhibit the function of immune cells in the respiratory system. Here is another study that shows that even if nicotine is absent in the e-cigarette, it can cause neutrophil dysfunction. This means that cells responsible for clearing pathogens and debris from the lungs may be less effective in e-cigarette users even without nicotine in it. With decreased immune cell function, the body is more vulnerable to infections, including respiratory illnesses like bronchitis and pneumonia. Vaping negatively impacts fertility in both men and women by introducing harmful chemicals that disrupt reproductive health. Here is a research study showing the same. In men, nicotine and other toxins in vape aerosol can reduce sperm count, motility, and quality, and lower testosterone levels, affecting libido and erectile function. For women, vaping can damage ovarian follicles, reducing egg quality, and disrupt essential hormones, potentially leading to irregular menstrual cycles and making conception more difficult. Nicotine's effects on placental development increase the risk of complications during pregnancy as well. I think the point is pretty clear here. While vaping might seem like a modern alternative with fewer risks than smoking, the reality is far more complex and concerning. From damaging lung tissue and cardiovascular health to impacting mental well-being, addiction pathways, and even fertility, the long-term effects of vaping are beginning to reveal themselves, and they're anything but harmless. As we look at the science and the potential consequences for our bodies and future generations, it's clear that choosing to vape is not a simple decision. So as you weigh the facts, ask yourself, is this a path worth taking? Is that habit or a simple flavor lingering in your mouth worth years taken out of your life? I'll leave that choice for you to make. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you think of this dangerous trend. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you around.